All right. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Danny, and this is The Common Rule. Happy New Year. Man, how the hell was it? I hope you made it through the festivities with all your fingers and toes, man. It's getting crazy out there, as I stated in the last one. I know I just recently made a podcast, but man, I just wanted to get on this thing day one and just be able to say, hey, this is the first podcast of the new year here on the in 2019. Woo, we made it. I tell you what, man, I had a great time last night. It was mellow. It was everything I wanted it to be. The tacos, man. You know what? I don't want to sit here and toot my own horn, but you know what? Toot toot! These tacos I made last night, oh my God. I made like carnita style tacos, and they were so delicious. I also make my own salsas. I made my regular hot red salsa, and then I made a guacamole salsa that I'm getting proud of. I'm getting proud of it. It's almost perfect. I just love it. It's just a great thing, great tasting thing. And of course, bourbon. My buddy brought over a really nice bottle of bourbon, and we just went to town on it. Don't get me wrong. We didn't overdo it. We had nice. It was a great smooth bourbon. We put a hurting on it. Friends ended up coming over, partaking of the tacos. I think they left happy. At least they told me they did. And no one got crazy. We just had a great time. Played a little bit spades. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the card game spades, but we got into a little bit of that before, right around where the new year hit. I don't know. That's right around where the bourbon started hitting, and things got a little fuzzy. But yeah, that's how I spent my New Year's, with friends and tacos and bourbon, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Well, I could have had a couple strippers over. That would have been real fun. Don't get me wrong. Maybe next year. But hey, I wanted to more or less have a year in review here. I wanted to talk about mostly how many things I learned within the last year in order to make, one, things like this podcast possible, but two, allow myself for more creative outlets, let's just say, just more ways to create. And I think that, hopefully you guys get something from it. Again, I talked about in the last episode how many YouTube hours I logged in. It's not that I'm going to sit here and talk about how great YouTube is, although it is great, as I talked about before. It's got its ins and outs, but I did want to just go over the things that I learned in order to open up more creative outlets for myself. And, hopefully there's a takeaway for you from this. It's not completely just all about me, but most of the time it is all about me. So one of the major things that I keep talking about here is I call it everything I learned through the Instapot. Now, I say Instapot because it's like a kind of like, when you make copies, you make Xeroxes or something. It's just a ubiquitous name, but truth is, the electric pressure cooker that I use the most is the GoWise electric pressure cooker. I have three of them. I have a little 3-quart, then I have a 6-quart, then I have a huge 14-quart by GoWise, and that's the one that I'm experimenting. I got one that big because I'm going to experiment with my tamale recipe. That'll be coming up later. But yes, the things that I learned on the Instapot just really opened the doors to another creative outlet. I learned how to podcast this past year. I don't know if that's good for me, bad for you, but yeah, it is a learning curve. It isn't just record it and put it up. There's a few things that you got to do for podcasting if you're going to do it the way that I'm doing it on my own, as opposed to having a producer and someone else, like you just go into a studio and record it and have somebody else do the back end for you. So podcasting is something that that I learned with that. And along with podcasting, of course, comes I learned how to edit audio. I'm not a complete master of it, but I do know enough skills now in order to edit my podcast, in order to audio edit a little bit of music. Now that I've had these tools through the Adobe Suite for a long time, and I just am now starting to use other things besides Photoshop and Lightroom, which are great. But now I'm using Audition and Premiere, which brings me up to the next thing that I learned is how to edit video through Premiere. I have a very basic understanding right now of video editing. I'm not going to be able to edit something with a bunch of special effects or anything like that just yet. But for what I want to do, for how professional I wanted to do, I'm still learning. But I am at the point right now where I'm comfortable editing video, doing my thing on it. With that comes learning how to film and capture video. Now, I use different mediums to capture film. Of course, there's the easy digital camera, the fat DSLR that I have. I'm also using just a Canon G15 small, earlier version camera, earlier generations video camera. And of course, I have the cell phone. The cell phone is a very, very viable form of recording imagery. And I'm still using, you remember those mini DV tapes back in the day? I'm still using that. I can I know how to capture what they call video capture and put that into the computer and just have it organized as, have it translated as a digital file and be able to edit it just like a regular digital imaging. I learned how to do that. Bread making. Oh, I learned how to make my own bread this year. Oh, you guys got to get into that. It is so easy. It is it's called a no knead process, and you can look it up on YouTube if you're very, very interested on it. But essentially, there's no kneading. You just proof it for extended periods of time, essentially overnight, maybe 2 days if you're feeling crazy. I learned how to use my own sourdough bread. So, the bread making translated into my own homemade pizza making. You guys, I'm telling you, we got to learn how to slow cook. Well, one of the reasons, here's the thing. One of the reasons I got into the Instant Pot in the first place was because I am able to cook quickly. If I'm feeling a need for tacos or something like that, within the hour, I can have just about any taco that I want. And I'm working on experimental tacos as well. Because again, finding a good taco in Phoenix is a lot harder than it seems for someone who like myself, I'm a taco lover, I learned how to record audio. I bought a bunch of equipment, but turns out I didn't need as much equipment as I wanted to, but I do have it. I learned how to record audio. What's important to me is I wanted to be able to podcast and record 4 to 5 to 6 people at a time, which is basically a band. I wanted to be able to record a band all at once, and I wanted to be mobile. So I learned how to record audio, and I learned how to, again, going back, I learned how to edit the audio once I have it all recorded. I'm not set up just yet for like a live podcast, but I do love the sense of recording and going back and being able to edit the audio and make it sound professional. And from that, I learned how to organize all my digital files so that I know where everything is, and it makes it a lot easier for editing. That's something that's major. We gotta learn how to organize, and I talked a little bit about that in one of the previous podcasts. Organization is something that we need to put at the forefront of our creative workflow. Here's a one that's not so obvious that maybe you guys will pick up on a little bit. I learned how to compromise a little bit more in order to obtain results, especially on a commercial project that I've been working on with my friend here. Him and I have actually had to compromise quite a bit with the corporate people that be, as far as obtaining an artistic vision and being able to translate that into some sort of commercial output for the corporate. Obviously, the corporations do not have as big of an artistic sensibility as, well, let's just say my friend and I. And we think they're falling short in that, obviously, but we have learned in order to, well, let's just say convince them to go closer and closer to our direction little by little, we've had to make some compromises. And so far, it seems to be working. And I'm actually really proud of that. I've never taken part in as big of a commercial project as this one. I'm pretty proud of what we're doing, what we're accomplishing, and the way that it's going. It has been frustrating at times, but slowly but surely, bits and pieces, and we'll be able to get to where we need to be, I think, as long as we keep our vision goal on target and still visible and don't lose that. We'll be able to get everybody on the same page. The other thing I learned is I learned how to make beats. Well, that's a strong statement. I'm learning how to make beats. I've had this little drum machine for about 10 or 15 years now. I don't know how long. It was one of the first things that I bought when I really got into playing guitar a while back when I was young, dumb, and full of fun. I really wanted to just be able to start creating more complex sounds and things like that. And I got this little drum machine, which at that time seemed really advanced, and bringing it back out and playing with it, yeah, it turns out it's still a viable machine to create beats and songs, and it's definitely something that Juan Minuto is working on and learning. And from that, I learned to, and again, I touched upon this, I didn't just learn how to organize my digital files. The physical gear, again, and I talked about this before in one of the previous podcasts, the physical gear is also organized. I need to know where everything is so I can pull it out and start using it, no matter what my little project is all about. Darkroom, again, the darkroom stuff, learning how to print. So I did darkroom stuff back in college a few years ago. So I just am relearning some of the things, but the chemicals are different than they were back then. There's a plug to Photographer's Formulary. If you don't know who they are, they make these great chemicals that are just amazing for all types of photographers who print and who develop their own film. They're legit. So the chems that they've come up with are advanced from the chemicals that were that I was using back 10, 15 years ago in the darkroom as I was learning how to process or how to make prints in the darkroom. And, you know, learning new techniques in the darkroom from people. Again, blessed be the YouTubers. You know, some of them are producing great content down there. Let's just say I got back in touch with my guitar as far as creating Juan Minuto stuff. And granted, you know, it's shit that I love. You guys know I'm really into the blues. I'm really doing these guitar riffs. And now I have an outlet for it. Or let's just say Juan Minuto has an outlet for it. I love doing the intros. No, Juan Minuto loves doing the intros and outros to the podcast. Now that I'm thinking about doing more how-to videos, because I really liked how I did the last one, learning how to make beats and Juan Minuto's experimental guitar work, I think we're going to be able to make our own backup music for our own videos. I'll get into this later. I just don't like picking up free music from wherever you pick up your royalty-free music from. Well, quality of the music isn't really as good. Obviously, it's free. And so Juan Minuto was saying, well, if it's going to be that shitty, I can do shitty background music as good as anyone. And that's where that's coming from. I'm really into, as some of you may know, I'm really into music, but I don't like stealing music. I just don't like the way the royalties and the musicians are treated as far as getting paid. And I'll get into that into another podcast. I'm still trying to pick up a little bit more information on that to give a more complete podcast and not just start shooting off at the hip. Most of us know that as musicians, and even overall as artists, we need to find better avenues online to get the work out there and to not get financially taken advantage of, for lack of a better term, or actually for lack of not being rude or crude. And one of the last things that I learned, or one of the other things that I learned, because I learned so much more, and I just don't want to bore you guys with some things. I learned, and this is one of the things I'm most proud of, I learned how to make a Kindle book that's more interactive, that is going to have audio and video examples in it as well. I love Kindle. Kindle is how I've been publishing a lot of my books lately. A lot of my Red House magazine books, and I'm calling them also the Common Rule issues, where I'm essentially making digital photography books online. They pay. Kindle does pay you. They have a payment program, and I actually think that I make more money off of my shitty little books than most musicians make off of Spotify on a monthly basis. With the numbers that I see from Spotify and from other cats making fractions of pennies per play, Kindle seems to be paying out pretty decently as far as having my books out there, or having a digital library. And I'll get into that as well too, and more in depth. Again, I got a lot of podcasts and a lot of information to go through with you guys throughout the years. What I wanted to do was have another podcast. I was thinking about having another podcast, or maybe having something in this podcast of not how I shot something or how I made this, but more why I made it, so that we understand the creative process. I don't want to get into maybe the politics that go into it, but more of the emotional content. Like, I don't want to talk, like when someone writes a song, I'm not completely interested in the full meaning of the lyrics. I don't know what kind of bands you guys follow, but some of the bands that I follow have very ambiguous lyrics, to where unless you knew some sort of specific history with the band or really in tune to the things that are happening, the lyrics might not make as much sense, or you are picking up your own meaning to those lyrics, which are completely different. So in that aspect, I do like to keep something like song lyrics ambiguous and not change too much. But, we do sometimes need to know what the hell Eddie Vedder is singing about in certain songs. My approach to the thing is like why I shot this photograph. Some of it is self-explanatory for the most part, but some of it isn't. I just did some still lifes. I've been working on these still lifes for an art show, and it looks like the first art show for these photographs are going to be in March. I'll be bugging you about that within the next few podcasts, but I am really into shooting right now still lifes of rotting fruit and the process of the fruit rotting. I will go into more in depth as to why I shoot those things, but I think instead of making it a podcast, what I'm going to do is make a book out of it, an interactive audio visual book on Kindle, and where you can see the photograph, and then you can click on the icon, and then you can hear me say, well, here's why I shot this photograph, because of X, Y, and Z. I'll go a little bit more in depth through that. I think that's a better avenue than just, talking it on a podcast to where I can show you links or whatever to the photograph. Anyway, I learned how to do that, which is another creative output. What these things do now, and I've touched upon this on the other one, is that these things now give me, not that I didn't have a goal before, but give me a better target to create. Like, oh, this is going to be good for the book. This is going to be good for the podcast. This is going to be good for the Instapot. This is going to be a good recipe. And you get your creative juices flowing. And as long as we always are mixing our creative pot and making it and having it simmer, we are in a good spot. And I hope that you guys take a little bit from this, knowing that you can teach an old dog new tricks. With this new armed information at my disposal, I will now move forward into this new year with a creative flag flying high, and hopefully we all do, and hopefully we make things that are valuable emotionally and that cannot be ignored. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to this little first podcast of the year rant. Again, I wish you guys all the very best. Thank you so much. Keep tuning in. I really appreciate it. Have an awesome day and enjoy your youth.